think I want to make this film probably going to be public, but this is also to tell my friends and family about my experience, sort of all at the same time. So take a step back. A couple months ago, the past year, I've been in a really bad emotional place of just feeling low, depressed, anxious. What's my purpose in life? I'm 46 years old. I'm basically retired, but I still have energy. I still have life. Like, what am I going to do? What's the purpose? Right? This is like ephemeral question of humanity. Like, what the hell are we here for? So I've been really, really low. And so I've been sort of trying everything. Everything you can think of to deal with depression, all the things to check the boxes, see a therapist, get exercise, get sun, have social connections, work on a project, take Wellbutrin or, medications, take supplements, just kind of all the things that you're told to do to get out of depression. I was doing, meditating, for example, and just nothing was happening. I was seeing no change. Every day I would wake up and be like, well, I can't just stay in bed because, I have energy, but I have nothing to do, nothing that I want to do, nothing I'm excited about. And I was just constantly in that state. So Annie and I learned a lot about psychedelics just from watching, like How to Change Your Mind, Michael Pollan, seeing other shows. I've read books about it. And so I decided, I think I'm going to give it a try. So I had an LSD experience a couple months ago, right around the time of Burning Man. Even though that was significant, that isn't actually what I want to talk about now, because I feel like my most recent experience was the one that was really transformative, and it really was transformative. So there are retreats you can go to in Jamaica, Colombia, Portugal, lots of different places where you can be part of a retreat where they, do these ceremonies with psilocybin mushrooms, ayahuasca, for example. And I was looking into them, and in doing research, I discovered that, of course, drugs are largely decriminalized in Oregon and a few other US states, but also in lots of places in Canada, especially like the West Coast, British Columbia. So in Vancouver, drugs are so decriminalized, possession of and sale of small amounts, that not only can you openly purchase most drugs right on the street, but there are actually storefronts. As far as I know, Vancouver is the only city in the world where you can just walk along, see a storefront next to a Subway or a McDonald's or something, see a storefront that says mushroom dispensary, and I think that's the one I went to, medicinal mushroom dispensary. They have 3 locations there, and then there are other locations. One of them is Funguys, F-U-N-G-U-Y-Z, Funguys. Anyway, the point is you can just go into a shop in Vancouver and buy psilocybin mushrooms. You can buy other stuff too. You can buy LSD. You can buy, I think they sold ayahuasca, peyote, a few other things. You can just buy these things. So I learned enough about the therapeutic uses of psilocybin and other psychedelics, and I thought, something in my mind has to change. And the reason I thought that was because I had a set of beliefs about the world that intellectually I know, and I'll say what they are, and I'll even write them down on the board. But I wasn't living them. I wasn't feeling them. I was living the exact opposite of what I intellectually believed. And what I wanted was basically a hammer to bang these ideas into my head and into my body so that I would actually live them. So on that note, I checked Annie's schedule to make sure that it wasn't too onerous with the dogs. And with 3 or 4 days later, I flew to Vancouver, and on Saturday night, walked around, found this mushroom dispensary, and bought, I forgot what the strain was, but it was some particular strain. I bought 3.5 grams, which turned out to be way too much of dried mushrooms. So I ended up disposing of 1.5 grams and only taking 2 grams, which is a real psychedelic therapeutic dose of psilocybin. I also did it in a very controlled setting. So Annie took off the day of work, and she was on FaceTime with me the entire time for 6 or 7 hours in the experience, watching me, looking over me, making weird faces. I'll get to that in a moment. And then I was just basically in a hotel room in Vancouver, and I just experienced this. And I chose a room that had a really nice view, so I could just lay on the couch and just look outside. So it was a Saturday, I think it was a Saturday. And around 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock or something like that, I ate them. They were disgusting, and I just sat there and waited. So take a step back. What were the things that I was trying to internalize that I believed? I'm going to write them because they're so important to me. One is, I am not this body. And what I mean by that is, and I'm not going to try to prove it to you, I have other videos on it, but the point is, I believe that I have a soul that is independent from my physical body, and this body just happens to be the vessel through which I experience the world. So that's something that I intellectually believe, but I don't act like it. I act like this is my body, and my body is me, and when I look in the mirror, I'm seeing me. I'm seeing that body. I'm seeing it decay. I'm seeing it get worse. I'm seeing it atrophy. But really, I in fact intellectually believe that I am not this body. The second is sort of similar. Everything in the world that I own or control, stuff, it's not mine. It's all going to turn to dust soon, right? In a blink of an eye, everything that I have built, everything that everyone else has built is going to be dust. So it was something like, I own nothing. I'm sort of just renting this body and this house and this everything I have, this dog, sort of renting them, but they're not mine. The third thing I wanted to internalize was my worth, or rather, I am worthy, and it is independent of my achievements or accomplishments or productivity, because that is something that's driven me for so long, is this feeling that my worth is tied to my production, what I make in the world, how I create in the world, how I impact the world. And when I don't see impact, I feel like my worth gets less and less. So I'm constantly chasing a sense of worth because of this feeling that I have to earn it. I have to, every day that I get up, in order to earn the air that I breathe, in order to earn the love of my wonderful wife, I have to earn those things by what I produce, by taking care of the house, by mowing the lawn, by taking care of my properties, by writing blogs, making videos or whatever, and just being productive. Of course, you know, before this, I had the Agora Grande. I turned that church and that rectory into something significant. And so that was coming off of that. It's very easy to feel like my worth is tied to what I produced before and that I want to continue doing that. And it's very hard to match that. And then the fourth thing I wanted to internalize, and by the way, I believe this. My worth is independent of my achievements. I forgot to bring it, but of course, you know, I wrote a novel. You know that, right? You don't even know that. I wrote a novel in 2008. I never published. I just printed it for myself, and I love it. And it basically is a novel about somebody who is an achievement addict and eventually learns that his self-worth has nothing to do with his achievements. So I already knew this intellectually and have believed this deeply for almost 2 decades. It's called the Mobius strip, but I don't live by it. And then the fourth thing is basically everything is okay. Like, I'm constantly dealing with anxiety of, you know, everything's gonna fall apart and you know, what crisis am I gonna deal with? What fire am I gonna put out? But of course, when I think about it intellectually constantly, I know that everything is okay. Like, yeah, bad things may happen, but they're unlikely, and we've set ourselves up to be comfortable. And so really everything is okay. What am I freaking out about? So these were the 4 things that I went into the experience with. So that's something else I want to bring up. I think you know the idea of like set and setting. The experience that you have on psychedelics is heavily influenced by mindset, the state that you are in your mind, and your physical setting. So basically both your internal and your external surroundings or stimuli strongly affect how you will react to the psychedelics. And so to do a therapeutic dose, it should be with somebody that you trust, that you can talk to, somebody who sort of guides you or asks you questions when necessary, somebody who makes you feel safe. A setting that's beautiful but also feels safe and comfortable. It would have been horrible if we had actually taken LSD at Burning Man, right? For the first time, we would have, it's a wild, crazy place. These are a lot of people who don't know. That would have been a really bad experience. So I'm glad that we turned down that opportunity to experience Burning Man on LSD. So set and setting are really important. So the idea is that these psychedelics will do things and have done things to my brain that are really important. But if I didn't have the right mindset going into it and I didn't have the right setting around me, something beautiful and something that felt safe, then it would have been a very different experience. So I think my experience with LSD months prior had helped me to not that they're the same, psilocybin and LSD are different, but my experience with it laid the groundwork because I felt that it was safer, right? I'd done a lot of research on psilocybin. There's tons of research that's been done for decades at Johns Hopkins and Stanford and lots of universities, and how to use it in a safe way that is actually beneficial. So my mindset was going into it. I wasn't afraid of what I was but I was timid. Like I'd never experienced it before. But I wasn't afraid that I was gonna die or that, horrible things were gonna happen. I went into it with the idea, and I actually wrote these down on a piece of paper and stared at them over and over while I was having experience. So that's what was the experience? So I took it at like 2 or 3 o'clock, I think. Something like an hour later, I just noticed visually and it got more and more intense over time. I was looking out the window and I would look in a particular direction. All of a sudden I would notice something sort of like a patio of an apartment across the way. Like it would sort of melt a little bit and then like become really colorful. And then I had to get up to pee at one point, and he was watching me the whole time. And I looked at her, I looked at the FaceTime. I said, and I believed this with certainty. I was like, honey, you're using one of those like psychedelic apps to mess with me, right? And it looked, because I was looking at it, and it was like, it was all swirling, and she looked pixelated. And of course she was making faces at the same time, and they were like weird colors, whatever. I mean, I still saw her, but it clearly was a filter that she was using on her phone. But was absolutely certain. You're clearly using a filter. And then as I got up to pee and I kind of moved it away, I noticed, no, this is pretty much how everything is looking right now. So it wasn't an app. And I did look at my face in the mirror, which they often say don't do, but I wanted to because I wanted this. These are things I'm trying to really internalize. I wanted to see, am I going to see me or am I going to see this body that isn't me? It's the vessel through which I see the world. So there were lots and lots of just visuals. Oh, and also another thing is I was listening to, so again, this is serious research. So a professor at Johns Hopkins put together a playlist of music to listen to while you're having a psilocybin trip. And it's actually like 5.5 hours long, designed to go over the entire period. And I remember, like, it didn't seem to like really affect me much. A lot of it was just classical music, but I remember that I got to listen to it again. It was like right in the middle of it, there was this really weird, messed up song that was just so odd. And I feel like I need to like listen to it again to see if it was distortion I was hearing or if it just was a really weird song. It might have been. And so here's where it gets sort of deep. So I didn't feel otherworldly. I didn't feel, physically also, besides the visual distortions, physically I was very uncomfortable. Like I would feel freezing and I would cover myself with a blanket. I was like shivering cold. And then 3 minutes later, I was boiling hot and I just like, I'm sweating, why am I so hot? And it oscillated several times, like cold, hot, cold, hot. And I was just uncomfortable physically the whole time, but that wasn't what mattered. The visual distortions, none of that mattered. What mattered was this. I kept staring at this list and thinking, this is a failure. This is a failed effort. Nothing is happening. I'm just looking at colorful birds and my wife with her stupid psychedelic app. Nothing is happening. This is a waste of time. And I was feeling really low because I'd been so low, and this was sort of like something, for God's sake, something has got to work. So then I just started, I don't know if it was the music or what it was, but I stopped thinking clearly. And I was like all feelings, which is not me. You know this about me. I'm not usually feeling. I'm very intellectual. And so, but I kind of like my rational side of my brain sort of turned off and I just started feeling. And what I started feeling was, I just kept using the word just over and over. Am I just a speck of dust? Am I just, some guy in Greenville who mows the lawn here? Am I just a drug addict? I mean, not really drugs, but I take Adderall and I take, other prescription medications, and then I'm taking psilocybin now, and I was just like, am I just a drug addict that I saw walking back on the street in Vancouver? Am I just, and I just kept feeling smaller and smaller and smaller. And then I just started bawling, just crying. And I felt this fear of my mortality, of, am I just going to blink out of existence in a few minutes or a few years? Is nothing that I've done meaningful? Am I just a speck of dust? Am I nothing? Am I unworthy? Am I useless? And not only was I asking those questions, I then was asking, do I even exist? Do I exist at all? Like, yeah, I was occasionally looking at Annie on FaceTime, and I was looking outside occasionally, but I just felt like I just don't even exist, and I don't matter. And I felt so small. And I just was crying so hard that like nothing that I have done matters, that nobody cares about me, that I'm not loved, that I'm not worthy. And I couldn't get out of it. I mean, I felt like, I probably could have if it was that painful, but I knew that I had to face it. So I was facing what I had come to face, and that was this fear of me being nothing, of me being a speck of dust, worthless, and that nothing matters. And it felt isolating and scary and sad. I just felt so sad, and I just cried and cried. So this is not a fun trip, and it's not supposed to be if you have work to do. Like, it was like my deepest fear. I have lots of fears, but the deepest one was me being nothing, me being worthless, me being none of this matters. And it forced me to face it. I felt that meaninglessness in a way. I know this sounds very depressing, but it does get better. I felt this emptiness and this meaninglessness deeply. I felt it. I wasn't thinking about it, but I was in my entire body felt like I was nothing. Nobody loved me. Nobody could hear me. I don't matter. So after a while, maybe it's hour 4 or 5, as I'm coming out of it, I'm still listening to the weird music, and I've cried a lot, but I'm kind of cried out. I'm thinking to myself, nothing happened. Like, I don't feel different. I don't feel any change. I certainly didn't internalize nothing happened. It was a waste of time. But I did have this one insight as I was coming out of it that was important enough that I wrote it down. And that was, what makes my life meaningful is the fact that I am experiencing it. And it was so clear to me when I wrote it down. I didn't think it was that big a deal. I was like, well, it's worth writing down. But it was so clear to me at the time, and it's clear to me now. And what I realized was There's nobody else in the universe who is experiencing the world through this touch or through these eyes or through the sound that hits these ears. Nobody. And I don't know why I inhabit this body, but I do. And the experience that I have through these five senses in this very weird, absurd world are what make this life meaningful and nothing else. And I felt that. And I'm not going to try to convince you of it, but the point is, I felt that. Like, I didn't just think it, I felt it. And the more I thought about it that day, and the next day, and over the past, this was 2.5 weeks ago, ever since then, I think about this every day. And what I realize is that this encapsulates everything that I had wanted to internalize. And I'll show you. If what gives this life meaning is the fact that I'm experiencing it, well, that means that I am something else beyond this body, besides this body, which I already intellectually knew, but I feel it now. 2, I own nothing. Well, it's sort of the same thing. I don't own this body. I don't own anything around me. 3, I can't earn my worth from anyone else if they don't have meaning, if their lives are not meaningful. So what gives their life meaning? It's the exact same thing that gives my life meaning. And that is the fact that I uniquely experience the world through these eyes.
You're saying you're experiencing the world and you're using your body's example of how you experience the world, but how you're feeling emotionally and internally isn't necessarily through any of the five senses.
Yes, that's right. That's right. I'm still trying to prove that in a physics level, but yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So there's something there that is beyond those five senses. Absolutely. So I literally, since then, since that day 2.5 weeks ago, not a single moment have I felt I need to do something. I need to be productive. I mean, it's enormous. That has been my life for decades, is always feeling like I have to create something amazing. I have to do something. I have to impress other people, right? Because I need to earn my worth from them to show them how great I am. But the problem is, what value do their lives have if my life doesn't have any meaning, right? So our meaning comes, in my opinion, from the fact that we uniquely experience the world from these eyes. So I've known this for so long, intellectually. I wrote a novel about it, but I've lived for years and years and years exactly the opposite, always feeling like every day I have to earn the food I eat. I have to earn the air that I breathe. I have to earn the love that I get from my friends and family. But this is gone. I don't feel this at all since then. And then the fourth is kind of strange. So do I feel better since mushroom experience? No. Well, you might observe, yeah, but it's not so much that I feel better, it's that is no longer the focus. What I'm doing now is, because I'm the only one who can experience the world this way, I don't turn away, at least as often. I'm really trying to make myself in the present. I don't turn away from my pain or my anxiety. When I feel them, I feel them. And I just say, yep, that's anxiety. I know where it is. I know where I feel it. That's a pain in my right foot where I twisted it a couple weeks ago. Instead of, what's that?
You've come to terms with your pains. And
Yes. And realizing that is part of my unique experience. I probably do feel better on average, but the point is, it's because I'm not fixating constantly on taking pain and getting rid of it, or taking happiness and joy and trying to figure out, well, how can I make it even better? That's something I would do all the time. Something's already great, but the music isn't quite right, or the temperature's not quite right. Something's always wrong. I'm always looking for a reason to make it better. But now I'm much more just experience it. Like, yeah, it is what it is. And being in the moment allows me to accept the pain and to appreciate the joy. Right, it's an appreciation, not a thanks, but an appreciation, as you would like stare at art or something. And I've actually done that now. I've been sitting on this, the day bed out in the back porch for hours. I'll just lay there and just watch the trees and the birds and just observe and be in the moment. And it can be joyful, but that's not the reason I do it. I do it because when I'm constantly thinking about the future or trying to change the situation, I'm not experiencing the moment. So anyway, so the point is that it also led to this too. The fact that I am experiencing the world through these eyes makes me realize that everything's okay. Oh, and there is one more thing I want to say. All these strategies that I was using before to try to get out of my depression, not all of them, but lots of them, I'm now just doing naturally. Like, I am meditating on a regular basis. I'm breathing from my diaphragm. I'm going more slowly. I'm being present. I'm, so many of I'm getting exercise, getting sunshine. I mean, all these things that you're supposed to do to get out of depression, it wasn't working for me. And the reason it wasn't working for me was because I wanted to get out of the damn depression so that I can get back to where I was, which is producing. I was forcing it. I wanted, it was a means to an end. I wanted get out of the depression and the anxiety so that I can get back to being this productive person that I used to be, so that I can impress people and gain my value and worth from the things I did. I don't know if any of this resonates with you personally, but the point is that when you go into a psilocybin experience in the right set and setting for therapeutic purposes, it kind of forces you to face your own demons in a safe way. And not for everyone, but for a significant portion of people, it just changes something. And something changed in me that was very significant. I guess the last thing I noticed was, I feel like, this is weird to say, but it's an honor to reside in this body and to have the thoughts that I have. Like, I have had all kinds of cool thoughts in philosophy of physics for years, and I spent so much time trying to publish them or convince people. And I've just stopped that. I don't care about convincing people at this point, but rather I'm reflecting more on those original insights and thinking, wow, it was so amazing to have that insight. And it doesn't even have to be an original insight. You know, lots of people might know how to cross stitch or something. And the moment you learn how to do the cross stitching, I don't know how to cross stitch, but that moment you learn is a cool insight, that if you're really present for that moment when you learn how to do it, it doesn't matter if anyone else has come up with it. It's just cool. So I wrote, what an honor it is to reside in this body and experience the insights I've experienced. How fascinating and wondrous it is to experience wonder and understanding. So yeah, things have changed. I am no longer depressed at all. I don't meet any of the standards for depression. I am still anxious. I still have some generalized anxiety disorder, GAD, but that's because it's physiological. I've trained my body so long to get anxious so that I'll get it moving, so that I'll, what's that?
It's better though. Your anxiety is better.
Oh yeah, well it's definitely better. It's definitely lower. But the point is, I've trained my body to do these things for so long that what I'm doing is now going through the process of deprogramming and untraining my body, all these, horrible physiological responses that make me want, oh my God, I need to earn my worth. And so it's taking time, but it is getting better, and it will continue to get better, because eventually my body will realize it's not making this guy productive anymore. So that will change. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that I am seeing everything through new eyes and from a different perspective. I'm appreciating and absorbing so much more than I did, and I want to continue doing that. Any questions? Are you going to give me a round of applause? Oh, wow. All right. Yes, all right. Makes me feel very worthy. Thank you very much.
How much of number 3 is tied to the system that you just happen to grow up in, this capitalistic?
Oh yeah, a huge amount, absolutely. Yeah, of course. I mean, starting from, when I was in 7th grade and I went to a math competition, I got first place in the county, and like all of a sudden I was like this celebrated math student in high school, and it just sort of, that single thing launched me in this trajectory of like, I have to prove, I have to like be the winner, I have to do this. But you're right, like that's the entire system that we live in, is keeping up with the Joneses or exceeding the Joneses, and getting your titles and getting your accolades and all kinds of stuff. Oh yeah, absolutely. I think this is bred into us. I mean, I think I personally have experienced it worse than some, but I think most Americans probably feel this to some degree. Even this thought of like taking a break and resting, going on vacation or whatever, like it always, for me and for lots of people, has been the means to an end. The means is refresh your body so that you can get back to work, right? As opposed to, no, I've worked for the purpose of sitting here for 2 weeks on a lounger in the beach or something and just enjoying the music, right? Whereas I think probably in Europe it's much more about like, working for the opportunity to spend time with friends and family and whatever. Yeah, I agree. I mean, do you feel this a lot?
And grow internally. I feel like Americans are somewhat deprived of that because of the type of vacation mindset that we have. It's like 2 weeks, like you said, you go to the beach, you probably drink a lot.
Right.
You're not doing any like self-introspection, like you're not asking these deep questions.
Right.
You don't feel like you have the time to do so.
Right, exactly right. So these were the specific things that I personally like believed, but I didn't live by them. I was always like, I believed everything was okay when I looked at, the situation, but I didn't live it. I always felt anxious, like, oh my God, what fire am I gonna have to put out today? And, I believed this, but I was always wanting to produce. And every time I looked in the mirror, I just saw this, I'm getting older, and I'm 46 now, and I'm just, everything's gonna get worse, as opposed to thinking to myself, what I actually believe now, which is, I'm not this body is decaying. I am actually getting wiser and having more experiences. And I feel it. Like, it's not like I'm just like, these are not just, trite expressions. These are, I actually have internalized this feeling that this body is going to be dirt in a century or two, and probably even long before that. But I am getting amazing experiences. I am witnessing the world through these eyes, and it's such a privilege. It's such a wondrous experience to know that you might be seeing similar things that I am, but you are not experiencing what's going on in here, and I'm not experiencing what's going on behind those eyes or those eyes or those eyes. And so to realize that you alone are the sole keeper of the experiences that happen with those five senses. What?
Of my soul.
Of your soul, exactly. It makes everything so much more amazing and more wondrous. So yeah, I don't know, that's it.
What did you see in the mirror when you looked at yourself?
Old. Yeah, it wasn't a skeleton exactly, but this face looked just old and wrinkly and like and pixelated. And if you thought that that was you looking into the mirror, it could be terrifying, right? And I guess at the time I hadn't really gotten to this point yet, so I don't know why I wasn't terrified at that point, but anyway, yeah. It's fascinating. I highly recommend it, doing it in a controlled environment. And the LSD experience, by the way, there's something I want to mention. Have you heard of ego dissolution? You haven't heard of it? So ego dissolution is something that happens with psychedelics, specifically psilocybin and LSD, especially with high doses. A high dose of psilocybin might have been, well, what I had, but also maybe even up to twice that. And with LSD might be like 150 to 250 micrograms, something like that. What happens is there's this experience that most people get. It's called ego dissolution. It's like you pull out of your body. You see your body. Maybe you feel disembodied. You feel connected with the universe. And that's exactly how I felt in my LSD experience. It wasn't surprising to me because I already believed in a soul, but I could imagine for somebody who maybe an atheist or somebody who thinks that, the body and the identity are the same thing, it could be really weird and terrifying to see, for example, in my case, when I was listening to music, this is right at the peak of, this is now the LSD experience, it was right at the peak of it, and my eyes were closed, I had a mask on. Annie was over in another room, but she was accessible, so I wasn't scared. When I had my mask on, I was listening to music. First of all, at one point, I felt that I was waves, and I could only see waves, and I was the waves. And then another thing I did was, at some point, I looked back at who was listening to the music. I looked back at my body, and I saw meat, bloody meat, not like steaks that were, nicely sliced, but just a pile of bloody meat. And I saw that was my body right there. But I wasn't in it. I wasn't there. I was something else. And so I think that probably is a type of ego dissolution. And when you get to that point in a psychedelic experience and rise above the confines of your body and see it as something different, I think it can be really therapeutic. So I've said enough. I've taken enough of your time. Anything else that you think might be useful, interesting? You're going to fly to Vancouver now? Thanks for listening.